Hello everybody. So today, as part of our series on Java, we will be talking about classes and objects in Java, which is kind of progressing faster, but like classes and objects are kind of like one of the things that distinguish Java with different languages, which is its extensive OOP. So without further ado, let's get into it. So also, I finally got a JDK on my computer, which means that I can actually run Java now. So let's try that now to see if it's working. Oh, you have to name the class the same thing as the file name, which is kind of weird. And then public static void main string args, and then let's just try printing something out to see that everything is working fine. So we run with Java C. Okay, it's taking quite a bit to compile. That might be because of my computer, but alright, so we do see that it is working. So without further ado, a class in Java is kind of like a class in any other language, but for people who come from like a language with C++ or like C with no real not an amazing OOP system, a class is basically a set of instructions or like an exoskeleton for objects. And objects are kind of like flexible data structures which you can create your own types of attributes and methods. So for example, we could have like a person class, and then a person class would have several attributes. For example, we could have like a string of its name, and if we want this attribute to be accessible outside of this class, we would want to put public. So public string name, and let's just add another attribute. So and if you don't want it to be visible outside of the class, you could put private. So private int, let's just say identifier. It's like a citizenship ID or something. That's not a thing in my country, but and we want to make it final. If we recall in the previous video, final just means that it cannot mutate after that after you've assigned a value to it. And in classes, there's something called the constructor, which is something which is similar to a function, and it's called when you want to construct an object of this class or an instance of this class. So how we do this is basically public function inside public person or the name of the class inside this class, and this will basically be the constructor. And you need some arguments to construct a class. Hopefully your class isn't that boring as to not have any attributes, but anyways, so let's just say that we do one with an ID and a name. So we have an ID and a string name, and let's just name it something else just to make it clearer. So string n and int ID. Now what we do is we basically give these attributes here a value based on these arguments, and once you want to construct an object of this class, you would fill in these values later on, and you'll see that later. For now, let's just assign them to assign these attributes ID. And it says final here, but it seems that we can still assign an initial value. It's just that we cannot, I guess, change it later, which does make sense since you can't really change your ID later. And let's add a method to this class, so it will be a void method. So let's just say introduce. And it will take no arguments, and it will basically just write basically type out a short introduction of the person to standard output. So system.out.println hello, my name is and we would probably want to use print just to not put the new line. And then instead of this string, we would just print out the name, and then and my identifier. Again, I don't know why you would give out your ID, but let's just demonstrate that this is working. And we print a period, and we would use print line since we want a new line this time. Alright, so now let's just test what we have. So in order to construct an instance of this class, or to construct an object, we would use the class name where we would normally put the type name. And if you'll notice, it's in the same form as string, where the first letter is capitalized. This is because strings aren't necessarily a type in Java. They're another sort of class, but we'll talk about that in a later video. So let's create a dude named Bob, and we use constructors with the keyword new. And then here after that, we would just call the constructor and assign an ID to Bob, say 1001. And his name would be Bob Parsons. Okay, and this looks okay. So now we can just do bob.introduce, or let's just try what that looks like. So compile this, see if we missed anything. Alright, so Java person. So we ended up with an error. Okay, so now let's try running it. It takes a long time to compile on my computer. Oops. Alright, so it looks like we cannot have a similarly named class for some reason. So let's just rename this to individual. Such an amazing name. Hold on. Individual. Alright, so this time we use the keyword individual, and then let's just see if we are still if we still have the error. Alright, and we forgot to change here. Okay, so now what happened is basically the introduce method of this object was called, and the arguments or the attributes of this class are specific to this particular object. Like when we assign these values to the object, we see that it did remain what we assigned it to. So now why don't we add another method just to check that we can modify these attributes. So let's just say, or actually, why don't we try creating another object first. So before we do that, I wanted to show you something called constructor overloading. So basically, like C++, you can use multiple constructors in a class just to I guess, and this wouldn't end up in an error. What would happen is it'll just, I guess, check which constructor makes the most sense when you're constructing the object. And so you can have multiple different types of arguments here for different constructors, and it will just check which constructor it fits in, and then it will use that constructor. So it's a bit hard to explain, but I'll just show it here. So let's just say that you only knew what the person's ID was. So in this case, you would just use, so you would do ID normally, and then you'd have to assign the name yourself, since this time there's no name argument. So let's just say that we use the name placeholder. Alright, so this is like a different type of constructor, like a different way of constructing the object, I guess you could say. So if we use Alice and we only give the ID, it should be like, it should replace the name with placeholder, since we're using this constructor instead this time. So let's just try it. out. And we spelled it wrong. And we spelled it wrong again. All right. So yeah, we can see that this time the second object used the second constructor. Alright, so now let's try to create another method to modify the attributes of the class. So public void change name. Let's just say that you just found out what Alice's name later on and you wanted to change it. So in this case you do, okay, so string new name. Alright, let's just check this out. So let's remove Bob. And then Alice dot change name to Alice Williams. And then let's just introduce yourself again. Alright, so we can see that the second time the attribute of the class changed. So I guess this is demonstrating that you can use like a method in this manner to modify one of the attributes of this class. But if we try to, let's see what happens if we try to modify the identifier. Change ID. Alright. And then if we try running this, or we didn't even add this, hold on. Alright, so we already got an error where it says we cannot modify the final variable. So yeah, this is basically saying it's a constant and it already knows that we're not supposed to modify it. Alright, so this was basically just a basic introduction to objects in Java, and we showed how constructors work, how you can construct objects using constructors, how you can overload constructors to, I guess, construct objects in different ways, and we created some methods to demonstrate our class. Alright, so see you guys in the next video. Goodbye!